The transport ship, Meridian's Edge, shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull groaning under the stress of rapid deceleration. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the small porthole in the cargo hold, watching as an alien world filled his vision. The planet below was a patchwork of purple forests and silver seas, nothing like the blue marble he'd called home. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice belonged to Zix Ara, a tall insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the starlight like black diamonds. She was one of 12 aliens aboard the ship, all different species, all here for the same reason Marcus was. Yeah, Marcus replied quietly, though his stomach churned with nervousness. Beautiful. The other passengers barely acknowledged him. There was Thorek, a massive bear-like creature covered in thick gray fur, whose species came from a high-gravity world. His people were known throughout the galaxy as apex predators. Then there was Lith, a reptilian being whose scales could change color to match any environment, making her nearly invisible when she wanted to be. Her kind had ruled their homeworld's food chain for millions of years. Each alien on the ship represented the ultimate hunter from their respective worlds. Each had been carefully selected, tested, and proven worthy of this honor. Each had earned their place through blood, skill, and generations of evolutionary perfection. And then there was Marcus, human, from Earth, a planet most of these beings had never heard of. The ship's captain, a multi-tentacled creature named Gorthak, announced their arrival over the intercom. His voice carried the weight of ceremony, as if he were introducing gladiators to an arena. Honored hunters, welcome to Kithara Prime. You have been chosen from across the galaxy to participate in the Grand Hunt, a tradition spanning 10,000 years. Only the finest predators from the most dangerous worlds earn this privilege. The prey you will hunt has been specially prepared creatures so deadly that entire star systems have fallen to their kind. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He'd heard the stories during the journey. The prey were called shadow maws, creatures that had once threatened to consume entire sectors of the galaxy before being contained and bred specifically for this hunt. They were intelligent, adaptive, and utterly ruthless. Each one stood nearly 3 meters tall, with razor-sharp claws that could slice through starship hulls, and the ability to phase partially out of reality, making them nearly impossible to track. The rules are simple, Gorthak continued. You will be dropped at different locations across the hunting preserve. The first to claim 5 Shadowmaw hearts wins eternal glory and the Predator's crown. There are no other rules. Survival is optional, honor is not. Thorek let out a rumbling laugh that made the ship's hull vibrate. 5 hearts? I'll have them before the others find their first tracks. Art. Essis Lith's scales shifted to a confident gold pattern. Your confidence will be your weakness, furball. These creatures require finesse, not brute force. The other aliens joined in, each boasting about their species' hunting prowess. Marcus remained silent, checking his equipment for the 100th time. His gear looked primitive compared to the others: a simple plasma rifle, basic body armor, and a survival pack. No exotic technologies, no genetically enhanced abilities, no natural weapons. As the ship entered the planet's atmosphere, Marcus reflected on how he'd ended up here. Earth had only recently made contact with the galactic community, and humanity was still seen as a minor species. Curious, perhaps, but hardly noteworthy. When the Hunting Guild had requested Earth's greatest predator for the Grand Hunt, the selection committee had struggled to choose. Humans weren't the strongest, fastest, or most naturally armed species on Earth. They didn't have venom, claws, or the ability to blend with their surroundings. In fact, by most standards, humans seemed poorly designed for predation at all. But Marcus had been chosen anyway, primarily because he'd spent his entire adult life hunting the most dangerous game Earth had to offer. Not for sport, but for necessity. As a member of the Dangerous Species Management Division, he'd tracked and eliminated rogue genetic experiments, escaped bioweapons, and creatures that shouldn't have existed. He'd learned to hunt not just with weapons, but with his mind. The ship touched down on a vast landing platform carved from black stone. Through the porthole, Marcus could see the hunting preserve, stretching to the horizon, a nightmare landscape of twisted metal trees and floating stone islands connected by energy bridges. In the distance, storm clouds gathered around massive spires that pulsed with unnatural light. "Last chance to reconsider, little human," Thoric said as they prepared to disembark. The massive alien had to duck to avoid hitting his head on the ceiling. "This isn't like hunting the small creatures on your backwater world. These are shadow maws. They've killed beings twice your size, without breaking stride." Marcus shouldered his pack and checked his rifle's power cell one more time. "Thanks for the warning." The alien's compound eyes studied Marcus with what might have been pity. "Your species shows promise. But you lack the killer instinct that made us apex predators. Perhaps in a few million years of evolution." "Perhaps," Marcus agreed mildly. One by one, the hunters were transported to their starting positions. Marcus watched as Thoric was dropped into a region of dense metal forests where his strength would serve him well. Esislith vanished into an area of shifting mirror mazes where her camouflage abilities would be most useful. Each alien was placed in an environment that would maximize their natural advantages. Marcus was the last to be deployed. The transport dropped him on a barren plateau, overlooking a valley filled with the twisted remains of ancient structures. The terrain offered no obvious advantages for any particular hunting style. Just broken ground, scattered cover, and the constant howling of wind through metal ruins. As the transport lifted away, leaving him alone on the alien world, Marcus activated his equipment and began his survey. The hunting preserve was roughly 100 square kilometers, filled with enough shadow maws to make the competition interesting. Each creature was fitted with a tracking beacon that would activate only after it was killed, preventing hunters from simply following the signals. Marcus found a defensible position among the ruins and settled in to observe. This was where human hunting differed from that of other species. While most predators relied on speed, strength, or stealth to overpower their prey, humans had learned to hunt with patterns and patience. For the first hour, he simply watched and listened. The wind carried strange scents, ozone, decay, and something that made his skin crawl. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of the hunt beginning. Thoric's roars echoed from the metal forests, accompanied by the crash of breaking trees. Somewhere else, energy weapons discharged in rapid bursts as another hunter engaged their prey. Marcus remained motionless, his enhanced optics scanning the terrain below. Most hunters would have rushed into the valley, eager to claim the first kill. But Marcus had learned that the most successful predators were often the most patient ones. Then he saw a shadow that moved wrong, flowing between the ruins like liquid darkness. A shadow maw, roughly humanoid in shape but elongated and distorted, as if someone had stretched a nightmare into a mockery of life. Its claws caught the alien starlight, and Marcus could see the characteristic shimmer that indicated its ability to phase between dimensions. The creature was hunting too, its eyeless head turning as it searched for prey. It hadn't detected Marcus yet, but that would change the moment he moved or made a sound. Shadow maws were said to be able to sense fear, aggression, and even hostile intent from great distances. Marcus controlled his breathing and let his heart rate drop to near resting levels. This was another human trait that other species found puzzling: the ability to consciously control involuntary responses. While other predators were slaves to their instincts, humans had learned to master theirs. The shadow maw moved closer, its attention focused on something in the ruins below. Marcus realized it had detected another hunter, one of the insectoid species, whose natural clicking had given away their position. The alien was skilled and well-armed, but they were about to learn why shadow maws were feared across the galaxy. The attack came without warning. One moment, the shadow maw was standing among the ruins. The next, it had phased partially out of reality and appeared directly behind the insectoid hunter. Claws that could slice through starship armor punched through the alien's carapace as easily as paper. The hunter died without making a sound. Marcus watched as the shadow maw fed, noting its behavior patterns. The creature was intelligent. It consumed only the heart and brain, leaving the rest of the corpse as potential bait for other hunters. Then it retreated to a defensible position and waited, demonstrating a level of tactical thinking that explained why these creatures had once threatened entire star systems. Over the next several hours, Marcus observed 3 more kills. Each time, the pattern was the same. The shadow maw would detect a hunter through some combination of senses that human science didn't fully understand. Stalk them using its phasing ability to move undetected, then strike without warning. The attacks were always fatal, always precise. By the time the first day ended, 5 of the 12 hunters were dead. The hunting preserve's communication system crackled with updates from the survivors. Thorek had managed to kill one shadow maw through sheer brute force, literally tearing it apart with his bare hands. But he'd been severely wounded in the process. S's Lith had claimed 2 kills using her camouflage abilities, though she'd nearly been caught when one of the creatures had somehow detected her despite her perfect invisibility. And Marcus had killed nothing. Human Hunter, came a transmission from Gorthak aboard the orbiting command ship. Your status shows no confirmed kills. Do you require extraction? Negative, Marcus replied. Still hunting. There was a pause. The preserve's sensors show minimal movement from your position. Are you injured? Are you injured? No, just taking my time. Another pause. Longer this time. Human. The Grand Hunt has time limits. If you cannot keep pace with the other hunters. I understand the rules, Marcus said calmly, then switched off his communicator. The truth was, Marcus was doing exactly what human hunters had always done. He was learning. While the other species relied on instincts honed over millions of years of evolution, humans had developed something more flexible. The ability to analyze, adapt, and improvise. As the second day began, Marcus finally moved from his observation post. But instead of hunting shadow maws directly, he began tracking the other hunters. The aliens had scattered across the preserve, each claiming a territory that suited their hunting style. They moved in predictable patterns, following the behaviors that had made their species successful on their homeworlds. The problem was that shadow maws weren't from their homeworlds. These creatures had evolved to hunt apex predators, to turn the galaxy's most dangerous beings into prey. Every instinct that made the alien hunters effective was also what made them vulnerable. Marcus reached the metal forests where Thorek was operating by mid-morning. The massive alien's trail was easy to follow: broken trees, claw marks in metal trunks, and the occasional crater where his incredible strength had been applied. Marcus also found something else: shadow maw tracks. Lots of them. The creatures were following Thorek, learning his patterns just as Marcus was learning theirs. They stayed out of sight, using their phasing abilities to avoid detection while they studied their prey. Marcus counted at least 4 different sets of tracks, maybe more. They were pack hunting. This was new information, something the research files hadn't mentioned. Shadow maws weren't just individual predators, they were intelligent enough to coordinate when facing particularly dangerous prey. They'd learned that Thorek was too strong to take individually, so they were planning a group attack. Marcus had a choice. He could warn Thorek, potentially saving the alien's life but revealing his own presence. Or he could let events play out and observe, gaining more knowledge about shadow maw behavior while a fellow hunter died. It wasn't really a choice at all. Marcus activated his communicator and transmitted on Thorek's frequency. Thorek, this is Marcus. You're being stalked by multiple shadow maws. They're coordinating for a group attack. The response was immediate and aggressive. Human? How do you know this? Are you following me? I'm observing. There are at least 4 shadow maws moving in a pattern around your position. They're staying phased to avoid detection. But their tracks are impossible. Shadow maws are solitary hunters. The research clearly states, Thorek's transmission cut off in a roar of pain and fury. The attack had begun. Marcus moved quickly through the metal trees, following the sounds of battle. When he reached the clearing where Thorek had made his camp, he found chaos. The massive alien was in the center of a whirlwind of claws and shadow, his fur matted with blood as he fought against enemies that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Thorek was incredibly strong, each of his blows capable of pulverizing stone, but he was fighting ghosts. Every time he turned to face one attacker, another would phase into reality behind him, claws raking across his back before vanishing again. Marcus raised his plasma rifle and took aim, but hesitated. The shadow maws were moving too fast. phasing in and out of reality in patterns he couldn't predict. A missed shot would be worse than no shot at all. It would reveal his position and add him to the list of targets. Instead, Marcus did what humans did best. He improvised. The hunting preserve's artificial environment included weather control systems, designed to make the terrain more challenging. Marcus accessed his survival pack's emergency beacon and reprogrammed it, sending out a signal that interfaced with the weather grid. Storm clouds began gathering overhead with unnatural speed. Within minutes, lightning was crackling between the metal trees, and the electromagnetic interference was playing havoc with the Shadow Maw's phasing abilities. The creatures found themselves forced into solid reality more often than they wanted to be. Thoric, wounded but far from defeated, immediately took advantage. His massive fists connected with solid Shadow Maw flesh, and his claws found purchase in alien hide. Within moments, 2 of the creatures lay dead, their hearts torn from their chests. The remaining Shadow Maws retreated, vanishing into the metal forest like nightmares fleeing the dawn. Thoric stood in the clearing, breathing heavily and bleeding from dozens of wounds. His compound eyes found Marcus among the trees, and for a moment the 2 hunters simply stared at each other. "You saved my life," Thoric said finally. "You would have done the same," Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "No," Thoric said, surprising him. "I would not have. In my species, competitors are obstacles to be removed. But you helped me instead of letting me die so you could face weaker opposition." Marcus stepped into the clearing, his rifle still ready but pointed down. "Maybe that's why humans aren't apex predators on their world." Thoric's laugh was different this time, less aggressive, more thoughtful. "Or maybe it's why you should be." The massive alien gathered the 2 Shadow Maw hearts and added them to his collection. He now had 3 kills, putting him in the lead. But as he prepared to move to a new hunting ground, he paused. "Human Marcus, the storm you called, how did you know it would affect their phasing?" Marcus shouldered his rifle. "I didn't, but electromagnetic interference affects most quantum-based technologies, and phasing has to be some form of quantum tunneling." "It was an educated guess." "An educated guess," Thoric repeated. "You risked revealing your position on an educated guess to save a competitor. Sometimes that's all you have to work with." As Thoric disappeared into the metal forest, Marcus remained in the clearing, studying the dead Shadow Maws. Their bodies were fascinating, clearly evolved for predation, but with unusual features that suggested they were more than simple hunters. The neural pathways in their heads were incredibly complex, more like those of a scientist or engineer than a beast. These creatures weren't just apex predators. They were intelligent designers of death, capable of learning and adapting to any threat. The fact that they'd coordinated against Thoric suggested they were even smarter than the research had indicated. Marcus activated his communicator and sent a coded message to the orbiting command ship, requesting all available data on Shadow Maw evolution and behavior. The response came back within minutes, and what he read made his blood run cold. The Shadow Maws weren't native to Cathera Prime. They'd been transported here from their original homeworld, which had been completely depopulated, not by war or natural disaster, but by the Shadow Maws themselves. The creatures had systematically hunted every living thing on their planet to extinction, including their own prey species. They hadn't stopped there. The Shadow Maws had somehow learned to operate spacecraft, spreading to nearby systems and repeating the process. Entire worlds had been stripped of life before the galactic community had managed to contain them. The creatures in the hunting preserve weren't just dangerous predators, they were the last remnants of a species that had committed genocide on a galactic scale. And now, 12 of the galaxy's finest hunters were supposed to treat them as sport. Marcus looked at the dead Shadow Maws again, seeing them with new understanding. These weren't animals driven by instinct. They were intelligent killers who had chosen extinction as their gift to the universe. The Grand Hunt wasn't a sporting event, it was a desperate attempt by the galactic community to find beings capable of fighting back when the containment inevitably failed. As if summoned by his thoughts, Marcus heard a new sound echoing across the hunting preserve. It was a call, like nothing in any species database, rising and falling in patterns that seemed almost musical. Other voices answered from different directions, and Marcus realized what he was hearing. The shadow maws were communicating with each other. And judging by the number of voices, there were far more than the hunting preserve was supposed to contain. Marcus activated his emergency beacon and tried to contact the command ship, but got only static. The shadow maws had somehow disrupted communications, cutting the hunters off from outside support. In the distance, energy weapons fire lit up the artificial sky as other hunters encountered more than they'd bargained for. Marcus could hear S's Lith's distress calls being abruptly cut short, followed by Thoric's roars of defiance growing fainter. The hunt had become something else entirely. The shadow maws weren't prey anymore, they were the hunters, and the galaxy's finest predators had just become an endangered species. Marcus checked his rifle's power cell and began moving toward the sounds of battle. For the first time since arriving on Cathara Prime, he wasn't observing or analyzing. He was doing what humans had always done when faced with extinction. He was fighting back. The screaming started at dawn. Marcus had spent the night moving through the twisted landscape, following the sounds of combat as they grew more sporadic and desperate. The shadow maws' coordinated calls had continued throughout the darkness, a haunting symphony that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. By morning, the preserve had gone silent except for the wind through metal ruins and the occasional crackle of failing equipment. Marcus crouched behind a collapsed wall, scanning the valley below through his rifle's scope. Bodies were scattered across the terrain, alien hunters who had traveled across the galaxy to prove themselves against the ultimate prey. Now reduced to cooling corpses, their advanced weapons lay beside them, useless against creatures that could phase through reality itself. The shadow maws had disappeared again, but Marcus knew they were watching. They always watched before they killed. His communicator crackled with static, then cleared briefly. A transmission was coming through, weak but audible. Any hunter. This is Zixara. Trapped in the mirror maze. They're everywhere. Oh God. They're in the walls. The signal died in a burst of interference. Marcus checked his equipment inventory. One plasma rifle with enough charge for maybe 30 shots. Basic body armor that wouldn't stop a shadow maw's claws. Emergency rations for 3 days. And a collection of seemingly primitive human tools that the other hunters had mocked: a length of climbing rope, a knife, various sensors, and a device that looked like nothing more than a simple radio. He was the least equipped hunter in the preserve, facing creatures that had exterminated entire star systems. The odds should have been impossible. Marcus activated his personal log and spoke quietly into the recorder. Day 2, Hour 0, 600. At least 7 hunters confirmed dead, possibly more. Shadow maws are demonstrating pack behavior and intelligence levels far exceeding mission briefings. Communications with Orbital Command are blocked, suggesting the creatures have technological capabilities beyond their supposed primitive status. He paused, watching shadows move between distant structures. Beginning active hunting phase. If this log is recovered, note that shadow maw containment has failed. Recommend immediate system-wide quarantine, and a sound made him freeze. It was subtle, almost inaudible, the whisper of something moving through air that shouldn't be there. Marcus slowly turned his head and found himself looking directly into the eyeless face of a shadow maw. The creature stood 3 meters away, perfectly still, studying him with senses that human science couldn't comprehend. Its elongated head tilted slightly, as if puzzled by what it was seeing. Claws that could slice through starship hull flexed experimentally. Most beings would have panicked. The flight or fight response was universal among galactic species, a survival mechanism that had kept their ancestors alive for millions of years. Fear triggered action, and action revealed prey. Marcus did something that no other species in the galaxy could manage. He did absolutely nothing. His heart rate remained steady. His breathing didn't change. His muscles stayed relaxed. To every sense the shadow maw possessed, Marcus simply wasn't there as a threat or as prey. He was background, environment, part of the landscape. The creature moved closer, its head scanning left and right. Marcus could smell it now: ozone and copper and something like burning circuits. The shadow maw's claws passed within centimeters of his face as it searched for whatever had triggered its hunting instincts. Then, apparently satisfied that the area was empty, the creature phased out of reality and vanished. Marcus remained motionless for another full minute before slowly reaching for his rifle. The encounter had given him crucial information. Shadow moths, hunted by detecting fear, aggression, and hostile intent. They were perfectly designed to target apex predators whose survival depended on those very emotions. But humans had learned to hunt differently. They hunted with their minds. Marcus activated the simple radio from his equipment pack and began scanning frequencies. Most hunters would have dismissed the device as worthless. It was far too primitive to breach the Shadow Maw's interference. But Marcus wasn't trying to contact the orbital command ship. He was looking for something else. After several minutes of searching, he found a weak signal broadcasting on an emergency frequency. The transmission was broken and full of static, but recognizable. Thorek was still alive, somewhere in the metal forests, and he was hurt. Marcus began moving toward the signal, but not in a straight line. He took a winding path through the ruins, stopping frequently to observe and listen. The Shadow Maws were out there. He could feel their presence like a weight in the air, but they weren't moving toward him. They were moving toward Thorek. The massive alien's distress beacon was drawing them like moths to flame. His fear and pain were broadcasting across every spectrum the Shadow Maws could detect, marking him as perfect prey. They would converge on his location and finish what they'd started in the forest, unless Marcus got there first. He found Thorek in a crater that had once been a grove of metal trees. The alien was propped against twisted wreckage, his fur matted with dried blood, and his breathing labored. One arm hung useless at his side, and there were deep gouges across his chest where Shadow Maw claws had found their mark. "Human," Thorek said when he saw Marcus approach. His voice was weak but still carried that rumbling undertone. "You should not be here. They are coming for me." "I know," Marcus said, kneeling beside the wounded hunter. He pulled medical supplies from his pack and began treating Thorek's wounds. "That's why I'm here. You cannot fight them all. There are too many, and they learn too quickly." Thorek winced as Marcus applied a field dressing to the worst of his injuries. "Leave me. Save yourself while you still can." Marcus continued working on the wounds, his hands steady and methodical. "How many did you see?" "At least 8. Maybe more. They attack from phase state, impossible to track until they manifest." Thorek's compound eyes studied Marcus with something like confusion. "Why are you helping me? I am your competition." "Not anymore," Marcus said simply. This stopped being a competition when the Shadow Maws started coordinating. He finished with the medical treatment and began unpacking more equipment from his kit. To Thorek's surprise, Marcus wasn't preparing weapons. Instead, he was setting up what looked like a collection of scientific instruments. "What are you doing?" "Something humans are good at," Marcus replied, activating a device that began emitting a low humming sound. Improvising, the humming device was actually a modified geological scanner, designed to detect mineral deposits underground. But Marcus had reprogrammed it to scan for quantum fluctuations, the kind that might indicate something phasing in and out of reality. Within minutes, the scanner was picking up readings from multiple directions. The Shadow Maws were converging on their position, just as Marcus had expected. But now, he could see them coming. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying the display. "They're not actually phasing out of reality completely. They're shifting into a parallel dimensional space, probably quantum foam. That's why electromagnetic interference affects them." "Can you kill them?" Thorek asked bluntly. "Maybe," Marcus said, pulling out another device. "But probably not with conventional weapons." The second device looked like nothing more than a metal box with an antenna, but it was actually one of humanity's most sophisticated inventions, a quantum resonance generator. On Earth, it was used for advanced mining operations, breaking down matter at the molecular level through targeted frequency manipulation. Here, Marcus hoped it would do something much more dramatic. He connected the generator to his rifle's power cell and began adjusting the frequency settings. If his theory was correct, the Shadow Maw's phasing ability relied on quantum tunneling between dimensional layers. The right frequency should be able to disrupt that process, forcing them to remain in normal space where they could be fought. "They are close now," Thorek warned. struggling to stand despite his injuries. Marcus nodded, watching his scanner as the quantum signatures grew stronger. 8 shadow maws, approaching from different directions in a coordinated pattern they'd learned from their previous encounters, adapting their tactics to ensure no prey could escape. "When I activate this device," Marcus said, "they'll all be forced into normal space at once. That means 8 very angry shadow maws with nowhere to hide. Can you fight?" Thorek flexed his good arm, claws extending from his fingertips. "I can fight. But can you?" Marcus powered up his plasma rifle and checked the sight alignment. "I guess we're about to find out." The scanner showed the shadow maws had reached the crater's edge, moving in phase state just outside normal perception. Marcus could feel them out there, waiting, choosing the perfect moment to attack. He activated the quantum resonance generator. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Reality seemed to shiver around them, as 8 shadow maws were suddenly forced into normal space, materializing in a circle around the crater. For a moment, the creatures seemed disoriented by their sudden visibility. Marcus didn't waste the opportunity. His rifle discharged in a continuous stream of plasma bolts, each shot precisely targeted at the nearest shadow maw. The creatures were fast, but they were no longer untouchable. 2 of them fell in the first few seconds, their alien hearts pierced by superheated energy. Thorek roared and charged the nearest shadow maw, his massive strength finally having a solid target. His claws raked across the creature's elongated skull, black blood spraying across the crater walls. But the shadow maws adapted quickly. They spread out, using their natural speed and agility to avoid Marcus's shots, while staying close enough to prevent him from reactivating the generator. These creatures had learned to fight apex predators from dozens of different worlds. They knew every trick, every advantage that evolution had produced, except for one thing. They'd never fought anything like a human. Marcus did something no apex predator would ever consider. He threw away his weapon. The plasma rifle flew through the air as Marcus dove toward his equipment pack, grabbing not another gun, but his climbing rope. The shadow maws, expecting him to retreat or try to find better cover, were caught off guard as the human charged directly toward the largest of their number. The rope snapped out like a whip, the weighted end catching the shadow maw around its elongated neck. Marcus used the creature's own momentum against it, pulling it off balance and sending it crashing into 2 of its companions. While they struggled to untangle themselves, Marcus grabbed his knife, not the high-tech blade most hunters carried, but a simple steel knife that his grandfather had used for hunting deer in the forests of Earth. He drove it deep between the fallen shadow maw's ribs, finding the alien heart with the precision born of countless hours studying their anatomy. The other shadow maws regrouped, but their formation was broken. Thorek had killed another one, and now the remaining 4 found themselves facing opponents who didn't fight like anything in their experience. Marcus pulled his grandfather's knife from the dead shadow maw and smiled. For the first time since arriving on Kithara Prime, he felt like he was in his element. This wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest or having the best weapons. This was about being human. The next shadow maw to attack learned what that meant. It came in fast and low, claws extended for a killing strike. Marcus didn't try to dodge or block. Instead, he stepped into the attack, accepting a shallow wound across his ribs in exchange for getting inside the creature's reach. The knife went up under the shadow maw's elongated skull, penetrating the brain. The creature dropped instantly. 3 left. These final shadow maws were more cautious now, circling at a distance while they analyzed this new type of prey. They made soft clicking sounds to each other, clearly communicating in their alien language. Marcus could see them trying to understand what they were facing. Every apex predator they'd encountered had followed predictable patterns. Attack, defend, retreat, repeat. But humans had learned to hunt in ways that transcended instinct. "They're afraid," Thorek observed, blood still dripping from his wounds. "Good," Marcus said, pulling out his last surprise. "They should be." The device looked like nothing more than a simple flashlight, but it was actually a photon resonator, another piece of human mining equipment that Marcus had modified. When activated, It would produce a specific frequency of light that interfered with quantum tunneling. The shadow maws couldn't phase out of reality as long as they remained in its beam. Marcus activated the device and swept it across the remaining creatures. They snarled and hissed as their phasing abilities were neutralized, but they were trapped now. Trapped with two wounded but very angry hunters who no longer had to worry about their prey vanishing into another dimension. The fight was brief and brutal. Thorek's massive strength and Marcus's tactical thinking proved to be an unstoppable combination. Within minutes, all 8 shadow maws lay dead in the crater. As the immediate threat ended, Marcus collapsed against the crater wall, exhaustion finally catching up with him. His simple first aid supplies had been enough to treat Thorek's wounds, but his own injuries were more serious than he'd initially realized. "Human," Thorek said, kneeling beside him. "Marcus, you have saved my life twice now." "Just returning the favor," Marcus managed, pressing a hand against the gash across his ribs. "You killed half of them, but you made it possible. Your weapons, your tactics." Thorek paused, studying the crude devices scattered around the crater. "These are not hunters' tools." "What are they?" "Mining equipment, mostly. Geological scanners, molecular disruptors, photon resonators." Marcus managed a weak smile. "Humans aren't apex predators. We're something else. We're problem solvers." Thorek gathered the Shadowmaw hearts, adding them to his growing collection. Between them, they now had 8 confirmed kills, more than enough to win the Grand Hunt. But the competition seemed less important now. "The other hunters," Marcus said. "We need to find any survivors." "There may not be any survivors," Thorek pointed out. "The Shadowmaws have had hours to hunt them." Marcus struggled to his feet, testing his balance. "Then we need to make sure no one gets left behind." As they prepared to leave the crater, Marcus's modified radio crackled with a new signal. This one was stronger, more coherent than Thorek's had been. "This is Zeke's era," the transmission said. "I'm trapped in the mirror maze, Section 7. They have me surrounded, but I found something. The command center, it's here. The Shadowmaws. They're not just hunting us. They're trying to access the orbital controls." The transmission cut off, but not before they heard the sound of claws on glass and Ziexara's terrified scream. Marcus and Thorek exchanged glances. The hunt had become something far more serious than a competition. If the Shadowmaws gained access to the orbital systems, they could spread beyond Kithara Prime. They could escape into the galaxy and resume the systematic extermination of all life that had once made them legends of terror. "We have to stop them," Marcus said. "We?" Thorek asked. "You could leave now. Take your kills and claim victory. No one would question it." Marcus checked his remaining equipment and shouldered his gear. "That's not what humans do." Together, the unlikely pair began making their way toward the mirror maze, following Ziexara's coordinates. Behind them, the crater remained filled with the bodies of creatures that had once threatened entire star systems. Ahead of them lay whatever the Shadowmaws were really planning, and Marcus had the growing suspicion that the Grand Hunt had been a trap from the very beginning. The mirror maze stretched before them like a crystalline nightmare, thousands of reflective surfaces creating infinite corridors that seemed to extend in all directions. Each surface showed not just their reflections, but distorted versions that moved slightly out of sync, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope of reality. Marcus and Thorek stood at the maze's entrance, studying the twisting pathways that disappeared into shimmering depths. Somewhere inside, Ziexara was trapped with whatever secret the Shadowmaws were trying to protect. "This is a killing ground," Thorek observed, his compound eyes tracking the multiple reflections. "We will not be able to tell what is real and what is reflection. The Shadowmaws can attack from any direction." Marcus pulled out his quantum scanner and watched the readings spike wildly as it tried to process the maze's geometry. "It's worse than that. The mirrors aren't just reflecting light, they're reflecting quantum signatures. The whole structure is some kind of dimensional amplifier." He adjusted the scanner's settings, trying to filter out the background noise. After several minutes of calibration, clearer readings began to emerge. "There," he said, pointing to a pathway that seemed to lead deeper into the maze. Zixara's biosignature is about 2 kilometers that way. But what? Marcus frowned at the scanner display. There are at least 20 other signatures moving through the maze. All shadow maws. They're not hunting randomly, they're guarding something. As they entered the maze, Marcus quickly understood why it was such an effective trap. The reflective surfaces created visual echoes that made it impossible to judge distances or directions. What looked like a clear path ahead might be a reflection of a path behind them. Doorways appeared and disappeared as they moved, and more than once Marcus found himself walking into solid mirror when he'd been certain there was an opening. Thorek was having even more difficulty. His massive frame made stealth impossible, and his multiple eyes were picking up too many conflicting visual signals. Within minutes, he was stumbling and disoriented. "I cannot navigate this place," he admitted, steadying himself against a mirror wall. "My senses are designed for open spaces, not this." Confusion. Marcus studied the maze around them, noting how the mirrors were arranged. There was a pattern here, hidden beneath the chaos. It's not random, he realized. The whole maze is based on mathematical principles. Fractal geometry, probably. Each section repeats the same basic pattern at different scales. He pulled out his rope and began marking their path, tying small knots at regular intervals. "If I'm right, we can navigate by following the mathematical logic, instead of trying to trust our eyes." They made progress slowly, with Marcus calling out directions based on his analysis of the pattern, while Thorek followed behind, his strength ready for whatever they might encounter. The Shadow Maw signatures on the scanner were moving too, shifting position as if responding to their presence. "They know we're here," Marcus said quietly. "They're herding us towards something. A trap? Maybe. Or maybe they want us to find what they're guarding." 20 minutes into the maze, they found their first body. It was another hunter, a crystalline being whose species communicated through harmonic resonance. The creature's core had been shattered, probably by a single precise blow from Shadow Maw claws. Marcus knelt beside the corpse and noticed something odd. The creature's equipment was intact and undisturbed. "They didn't feed on this one," he observed. "Just killed it and moved on." "That's not hunting behavior." "Sentry duty," Thorek agreed grimly. "They are protecting something important." As they continued deeper into the maze, they found more bodies. Each hunter had been killed efficiently and left where they fell, their equipment untouched. The Shadow Maws hadn't been hunting for food or sport, they'd been eliminating threats to whatever lay at the maze's center. Marcus's scanner began picking up new signals as they approached the maze's heart. Technology signatures, power readings, and something else that made his blood run cold: transmission arrays. "Zixara was right," he said. "There's a command center here. But if the Shadow Maws get control of the orbital systems, they escape," Thorek finished. "And we become responsible for every world they destroy afterward." The path ahead opened into a large circular chamber, its walls covered in mirrors that reflected into infinity. In the center stood a control platform bristling with alien technology, communication arrays, navigation computers, and what looked like the master controls for the hunting preserve's containment systems. And standing at the controls was Zixara. The insectoid hunter looked up as they approached, her forearms working frantically at the alien interface. "Marcus, Thorek, thank the void you're alive. I've been trying to lock down the systems, but the encryption is beyond anything I've seen." Marcus approached the platform cautiously, his scanner showing no immediate Shadow Maw signatures, but something felt wrong. "Zixara, how did you get here? Your last transmission said you were surrounded." "Zixara, I found a maintenance passage," she said without looking up from the controls. "These maze mirrors, they're not just decorative. They're part of a massive computer system, processing quantum calculations. The Shadow Maws were using it to hack into the orbital network." Thorek moved to the chamber's edge, watching the mirror corridors for signs of movement. "Where are they now?" "My nose tells me they are still close." "Waiting," Zixara said. "They know I can't break the encryption. They're letting me exhaust myself trying, then they'll finish what they started." Marcus studied the control interface, noting the alien symbols and connection patterns. His background in problem-solving was making sense of the layout, even if he couldn't read the language. This isn't just a communication array, he realized. It's a complete navigation and transportation system. They could use this to redirect the orbital platforms, even hijack transport ships. He activated his own equipment interface and began running diagnostic scans on the control system. What he found confirmed his worst fears. They're not trying to escape the planet, he said. They're trying to use the orbital platforms to broadcast something. A signal. A signal to what? Thorek asked. Marcus continued analyzing the data streams, his face growing pale as he understood the implications. To other Shadow Maw colonies. The ones that were supposedly contained on distant worlds. This whole hunt, it was never about sport. It was about getting galactic security forces to bring their best hunters to one place, while the Shadow Maws activated a communication network. Zixara's forearms stopped working at the controls. I mean this is a coordinated uprising. Every Shadow Maw colony in the galaxy is probably preparing to break containment at the same time. And once they do... Marcus didn't finish the sentence. They all understood the implications. That's when Thorek's warning growl made them all turn toward the mirror corridors. Shadows were moving in the reflective surfaces. Dozens of them. Approaching from every direction. But these weren't just ordinary Shadow Maws. These creatures were different, larger, more deliberately shaped, with technological interfaces grafted into their alien anatomy. Modified, Marcus breathed. They've been augmenting themselves. The lead creature stepped into the chamber, and Marcus could see that it was partially mechanical. Biomechanical implants covered portions of its skull, and its claws had been replaced with precision cutting tools. When it spoke, its voice came through a translation device that made its alien language understandable. Clever little creatures, it said, studying them with sensors that glowed like malevolent stars. You have discovered our purpose here. Unfortunately, you are approximately 6 hours too late to prevent it. Marcus checked his scanner and saw that the transmission arrays were indeed active, sending powerful signals into deep space. The coordinate uprising was already beginning. But you have provided us with something unexpected, the creature continued. 3 survivors from different apex predator species. Your biological data will be most useful for refining our hunting protocols. More Shadow Maws entered the chamber, surrounding them completely. Marcus counted at least 15, all showing signs of technological enhancement. These weren't the creatures they'd been fighting before. These were something new, evolved beyond their original purpose. Why? Thorek demanded, his claws extended and ready to fight. Your species had conquered death itself. You had spread across the galaxy. Why choose extinction? The lead Shadow Maw tilted its augmented head. You misunderstand our goal. Predator. We do not choose extinction. We choose evolution. Every species we consume adds to our knowledge, our capabilities. We become more perfect with each world we cleanse. Marcus studied the creature more carefully, noting the biomechanical interfaces and the obvious intelligence in its enhanced features. You're not just hunters anymore. You're collectors. You're trying to absorb the evolutionary advantages of every apex predator species. Precisely. And now we have examples of the 3 most interesting species we have encountered. The creature's claws clicked against its mechanical augmentations. The strength of Thorek's people, the adaptability of Zixara's kind, and the problem-solving capabilities of humanity. Marcus felt cold understanding wash over him. You've been studying us. All of us. This entire hunt was a data collection operation. Among other things, yes. But the collection phase is now complete. The lead Shadow Maw gestured to its companions, who began moving closer. Prepare them for neural extraction. We have much to learn. That's when Marcus did something no apex predator would have considered. Instead of preparing to fight impossible odds, he began laughing. Something amuses you, problem solver? The lead Shadow Maw asked. Just thinking about evolution, Marcus said, reaching slowly into his equipment pack. See? You've made a classic mistake. You've assumed that predators are the pinnacle of evolution. But on Earth, We learned something different. His hand found the device. He was looking for a simple data pad that he'd been using to record observations throughout the hunt. Predators aren't the top of the food chain, Marcus continued, keeping the Shadowmaw's attention focused on him while he activated the pad's emergency protocols. Parasites are, and the most successful parasites aren't the ones that kill their hosts. The datapad was now broadcasting on emergency frequencies, sending out a signal that wouldn't reach the orbital command ship through the Shadowmaw's interference. But it would reach something else. They're the ones that convince their hosts to spread them voluntarily. The mirror chamber suddenly filled with new reflections, not of the beings inside, but of something else entirely. The mirrors were showing images from across the galaxy, from worlds where Shadowmaw colonies had been contained. And on every world, the containment facilities were opening. "Your signal worked," Marcus said, watching the feeds with satisfaction. Every Shadowmaw colony in the galaxy just received activation codes. They're all breaking containment simultaneously, exactly as planned. The lead Shadowmaw's enhanced features showed confusion. "This pleases you? You have doomed your own species." "No," Marcus said, activating another function on his datapad. "I've activated the real trap." The mirror feeds shifted, showing orbital platforms moving into position around each Shadowmaw world. Not the hunting platforms that everyone knew about, but military stations that had been disguised as research facilities. "Humans have been studying your species for longer than you realize," Marcus explained as massive energy weapons began charging on every feed. "We knew the containment wouldn't last forever, so we prepared something else." The orbital platforms opened fire simultaneously, their weapons specifically designed to disrupt quantum tunneling. On world after world, Shadowmaw colonies found themselves unable to phase out of reality as targeted antimatter strikes began sterilizing their populations. "You see," Marcus said as the chamber's mirrors showed the systematic destruction of an entire species, "humans learned something about extinction that you never did. Sometimes the best way to survive is to make sure your enemy doesn't." The lead Shadowmaw snarled and lunged forward, its mechanical claws reaching for Marcus's throat. But Thoric intercepted it, his massive strength proving superior even to the creature's augmentations. They crashed into the mirror walls, shattering reflective surfaces as they fought. Zix-Ara joined the battle, her 4 arms allowing her to engage multiple Shadowmaws at once, while Marcus continued working at the control platform. He'd found what he was looking for, the local containment controls. With the right adjustments, he could override the Shadowmaw's modifications and reactivate the hunting preserve's original security systems. The remaining Shadowmaws realized what he was doing and rushed toward the platform. But Thoric and Zix-Ara formed a defensive line between them and Marcus. The chamber became a whirlwind of violence as the two hunters fought against impossible odds. Marcus's fingers flew over the alien controls, following the mathematical patterns he'd learned to recognize. The system was complex, but it followed logical rules, and humans were very good at understanding rules. "Almost there," he called out, as another Shadowmaw fell to Thoric's claws. "Just need a few more seconds." Those seconds cost them. Zix-Ara went down under a coordinated assault from 3 enhanced Shadowmaws, her carapace cracked and leaking fluid. Thoric roared in fury and redoubled his efforts, but more creatures were pouring in from the mirror corridors. Marcus activated the final sequence and stepped back from the controls just as the lead Shadowmaw broke free from Thoric's grasp and charged toward him. The creature's mechanical claws were centimeters from Marcus's face when the containment field reactivated. Every Shadowmaw in the chamber froze as quantum dampeners engaged throughout the hunting preserve. Their phasing abilities were completely neutralized, trapping them in normal space. More importantly, the field began interfering with their biomechanical augmentations, causing system failures throughout their enhanced anatomies. The lead Shadowmaw collapsed, its mechanical components sparking and failing. Around the chamber, other enhanced Shadowmaws were suffering similar malfunctions as their stolen technology turned against them. "Impossible," the lead creature gasped as its translation device began failing. "We adapted. We evolved." "You stagnated," Marcus corrected, checking on Zix-Ara's wounds. She was badly hurt but alive. "Real evolution isn't about becoming the perfect predator. It's about becoming something new." The mirror feeds, showed the final stages of the galactic operation. On world after world, shadow maw populations were being eliminated with surgical precision. The species that had once threatened to consume the galaxy was being systematically removed from existence. "The universe will remember us," the lead shadow maw said, its voice growing weaker as its systems failed. "Probably," Marcus agreed, applying field dressings to Zeke's Ara's injuries. "But it will remember you as a problem that got solved." As the containment field stabilized, emergency transmissions began coming through on the orbital frequencies. Command ships were requesting status reports, and rescue teams were being dispatched to the hunting preserve. Marcus activated his communicator and sent a response. "This is Marcus Chen. Mission status." Hunt concluded, requesting immediate medical evacuation for wounded hunters and full containment protocol for remaining shadow maw specimens. "Understood, Hunter Chen. Extraction teams are en route." Status of the Grand Hunt competition? Marcus looked around the chamber at the bodies of creatures that had once threatened the galaxy, then at his wounded companions, who had helped him stop a coordinated uprising that could have destroyed countless worlds. "Competition was cancelled due to bigger priorities," he said. "Recommend commending all surviving hunters for extraordinary service." As they waited for rescue, Thorek managed to stand despite his injuries. "Human," he said. "I understand now why your species was chosen for this hunt. You do not think like predators." "No," Marcus agreed, helping support Zixara as her strength failed. "We think like humans. And sometimes, that's exactly what the universe needs." The mirror chamber continued to show feeds from across the galaxy as the last shadow maw colonies were eliminated. An entire species, gone forever. Some would call it genocide. Others would call it necessary. Marcus called it Tuesday. Because for humans, impossible problems were just another day at the office. 3 weeks after the events on Kithara Prime, Marcus Chen stood in the medical wing of the Galactic Station times Harmony's Edge *, watching Zixara undergo her final reconstructive surgery. The insectoid hunter's carapace had been rebuilt using advanced bioceramic composites, and the doctors assured him she would make a full recovery. Thorek had been discharged days earlier, his natural healing abilities allowing him to recover from wounds that would have killed most species. The massive alien had surprised everyone by requesting a transfer to Earth, claiming he wanted to study human hunting methods firsthand. "Visiting hours end soon," said Dr. Kithara, a crystalline being whose species specialized in interspecies medical care. "She should be conscious within the hour if you want to wait." Marcus nodded, settling into a chair beside Zixara's bed. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of debriefings, medical examinations, and what the galactic bureaucrats euphemistically called after-action analysis. The complete elimination of the shadow maw species had sent shockwaves throughout the galactic community, raising questions about humanity's methods and motives. Some species praised the swift action that had prevented a galactic catastrophe. Others expressed concern about any civilization capable of coordinating the simultaneous extermination of an entire species across multiple star systems. Marcus's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Korvash, the Galactic Security Council's chief administrator. The message was brief. "Final security briefing at 1,400 hours. Your presence is required." He sighed and closed the communicator. The debriefings had been getting increasingly hostile as the political implications of humanity's actions became clear. Several species were demanding answers about how Earth had managed to predict and prepare for the Shadow Maw uprising. The truth was simpler than they imagined, but also more disturbing. Humans had been studying the Shadow Maws since first contact with the galactic community, not as potential prey for sport hunting, but as a potential existential threat. While other species had seen the creatures as contained problems, humanity had seen them as time bombs waiting to explode. Zixara's eyes fluttered open as the surgical nanites completed their work. Her compound vision focused slowly, taking in the medical equipment and Marcus's concerned expression. "How long?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. 3 weeks. The doctors had to completely rebuild your thoracic shell. They say you'll be stronger than before." She attempted to sit up, then thought better of it as pain sensors registered protest. The shadow maws? Gone. All of them. The final count was 97 worlds completely sterilized, with containment facilities destroyed on another dozen planets. Marcus helped adjust her bed to a more comfortable position. The galactic community is calling it the most successful coordinated military operation in recorded history. And the Grand Hunt? Marcus managed a tired smile. Officially cancelled due to extraordinary circumstances. Though I think they're planning to create some kind of memorial for the hunters who died. Thorek suggested calling it the Hunt for Tomorrow Memorial. Zixara was quiet for a moment, processing the information. How many of us survived? 4. You, me, Thorek, and S's Lith. She was found 3 days after the rescue teams arrived, hiding in the camouflage pods she'd built. Apparently, she spent the entire time studying Shadow Maw behavior patterns and developed some interesting theories about their evolution. And the others? Marcus's expression darkened. 8 confirmed dead. They died trying to complete what they thought was a sporting hunt, not knowing they were facing a coordinated military operation. The weight of that settled between them. 8 of the galaxy's finest hunters. Beings who had earned their places through lifetimes of proving themselves against their world's most dangerous predators, had been eliminated by creatures that had been studying them for decades. Your species, Zixara said carefully. They knew this was going to happen. It wasn't a question. And Marcus didn't treat it like one. We suspected. The containment facilities were too convenient, too well designed for creatures supposedly caught by accident. The timing of the Grand Hunt, the selection process, the way the preserve was laid out, it all suggested a larger plan. So you prepared a counterplan. We prepared a solution. Marcus stood and moved to the window, looking out at the star field beyond the station. The orbital platforms weren't hunting facilities. They were weapons platforms, positioned to eliminate the Shadow Maw threat if containment ever failed. Zixara struggled to sit up further, her reconstructed carapace making soft clicking sounds as the new bioceramic settled into place. You've been planning genocide since first contact. We've been planning survival, Marcus corrected. The Shadow Maws had already eliminated life on dozens of worlds before they were contained. Their intelligence, their adaptability, their ability to coordinate across galactic distances, they represented an extinction-level threat to every other species. So you decided to extinguish them first. Marcus turned back to face her, noting the mixture of respect and concern in her compound eyes. We decided to be ready if they decided to extinguish us. The activation signal they sent to coordinate their uprising also triggered our response network. We didn't start this. Zixara, we just finished it. A soft chime indicated visiting hours were ending, but neither of them moved to leave. What happens now? Zixara asked. The Galactic Security Council is terrified of your species. They're saying humans are too dangerous to integrate fully into the galactic community. Marcus sat back down, fatigue evident in his posture. Maybe they're right. We approach problems differently than most species. Where you see a contained threat, we see a potential catastrophe. Where you plan for success, we plan for failure. And where we see competition, you see cooperation, Zixara added thoughtfully. You saved Thorek when you could have let him die. You helped me when I was trapped. Even though it put you at greater risk, your species doesn't think like apex predators. No, we think like survivors. And sometimes that means working together against bigger threats. Dr. Cathara returned, indicating that visiting hours were truly over. As Marcus prepared to leave, Zixara called out to him. Marcus, the security briefing, they're going to ask difficult questions. I know. Will you tell them the truth? Marcus paused at the door. Which truth? That humanity has been preparing for galactic-scale threats since we learned we weren't alone? That we've developed contingency plans for scenarios most species prefer not to think about? That we see patterns and prepare for possibilities that others consider impossible? All of it. Then yes, they deserve to know what they're dealing with. The security briefing was held in the station's primary conference chamber, a vast space designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of different species. Marcus entered to find a semicircle of beings arranged by order of galactic seniority, with Admiral Korvash presiding from a raised platform. The Admiral was a member of the hegemony species, beings who had achieved interstellar travel when most others were still discovering agriculture. His species valued order, protocol, and careful deliberation above all else. Hunter Marcus Chen, the Admiral began. You stand before this council to answer questions regarding humanity's actions during and following the Shadowmaw uprising. Do you understand the gravity of these proceedings? I understand that you're concerned about humanity's capabilities, Marcus replied evenly. And you should be. Murmurs ran through the assembled delegates. Several species representatives activated translation protocols, apparently unsure they had heard correctly. You admit that humanity poses a threat to galactic security? Asked Counselor Vextar, a reptilian being whose species had fought 3 separate extinction wars. I'm saying that humanity approaches threats differently than you do. Where you see individual problems to be managed, we see systemic risks to be eliminated. Admiral Korvash leaned forward. Explain the orbital weapon platforms. How long have they been in place? Marcus activated his personal datapad and projected technical specifications into the chamber's hollow display. The platforms have been operational for 18 months, since our analysis indicated that Shadowmaw containment was fundamentally unstable. We positioned them as research stations to avoid causing panic. Panic? Counselor Vextar's scales shifted to an aggressive red pattern. You deployed weapons of mass destruction without informing the Galactic Security Council. We deployed a solution to a problem you were unwilling to acknowledge, Marcus corrected. Our analysis showed that the Shadowmaws were not contained, they were preparing. The biomechanical augmentations we encountered were not recent developments. They had been planning their uprising for years, and you took it upon yourselves to prepare a genocide. The word hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Marcus let the silence stretch before responding. We prepared a defense. The Shadowmaws had already committed genocide on dozens of worlds. They had demonstrated the intention and capability to eliminate all life in the galaxy. We simply ensured they wouldn't get the chance to complete their goal. By committing an atrocity of equal magnitude. By preventing an atrocity of greater magnitude. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. The Shadowmaws were not interested in coexistence. They were not interested in negotiation. They were interested in consuming every other form of intelligent life in the galaxy to enhance their own capabilities. Admiral Korvash consulted his notes. According to your reports, the creatures demonstrated intelligence and technological capability. Could they not have been reasoned with? Offered alternative arrangements? Marcus almost laughed at the naivety of the question. Admiral, the Shadowmaws had spent decades studying every apex predator species in the galaxy. They had developed specific hunting techniques for each of us. The enhanced specimens we encountered in the mirror maze had biomechanical interfaces designed to absorb and replicate our biological advantages. He activated another display, showing the technical analysis of the captured Shadowmaw augmentations. They weren't planning to coexist with us. They were planning to become us, after eliminating the originals. Every species represented in this chamber was targeted for biological harvesting. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Shadowmaws hadn't just been planning to destroy galactic civilization, they had been planning to replace it with enhanced versions of themselves. Even if this is true, Counselor Vextar said finally, it does not justify the methods your species employed. Coordinated extermination across multiple star systems demonstrates capabilities that frankly terrify us. Good, Marcus said bluntly. You should be terrified. Because if humanity can coordinate the elimination of one threat, we can coordinate the elimination of others. The chamber erupted in angry voices and clicking sounds as various species delegates reacted to what sounded like a threat. Admiral Korvash called for order, but the damage was done. Are you threatening this council? He demanded. I'm explaining reality, Marcus replied. Humanity doesn't make empty threats. We make contingency plans. We study problems. We develop solutions. And when those solutions become necessary, We implement them. He gestured to the holo display, which now showed human colony ships departing Earth for distant star systems. Right now, human explorers are mapping regions of space beyond current galactic boundaries. We're establishing research stations, communication networks, and yes, defensive installations. We're doing what humans do, preparing for the next threat. What next threat? Admiral Korvash asked. Marcus met his gaze steadily. The one you haven't thought of yet. The one that's preparing while you're focused on managing existing problems. The one that's studying your weaknesses while you're debating protocol. He activated a final display showing deep space sensor readings from the galactic edge. There are energy signatures out there that don't match any known species or technology. Something is moving in the dark between galaxies. Something big enough to register on our most sensitive instruments. While you've been focused on containing individual threats, a larger threat has been approaching. The chamber fell silent as delegates studied the sensor data. The readings were subtle but unmistakable. Something vast was moving through intergalactic space, heading toward their region of the universe. Why are you telling us this? Admiral Korvash asked quietly. Because humanity learned something from the Shadow Maw crisis, Marcus said. Some threats are too big for any one species to handle alone. Some problems require the entire galactic community working together. He closed his datapad and looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds. You can fear humanity's capabilities, or you can be grateful that those capabilities are on your side. But you can't have both. And given what's coming, I suggest you make your choice quickly. As Marcus left the chamber, the delegates were already beginning heated discussions about humanity's revelation. Some would call for immediate action to address the approaching threat. Others would demand restrictions on human military capabilities. But Marcus knew that ultimately, it wouldn't matter what they decided. Humanity would continue doing what it had always done, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. And when the next threat arrived, they would be ready. 2 years after the Shadow Maw crisis, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the Deep Space Monitoring Station Times Vigilant Dawn *, watching as massive shapes moved through the darkness beyond the galactic rim. The approaching entities were still 3 months away from the nearest inhabited system, but their sheer size defied comprehension. Each construct was larger than most space stations, moving with purposeful intent through the void between galaxies. Long-range sensors indicated they were artificial vast machines of unknown design and purpose, heading directly for the Milky Way. Still no response to our communication attempts, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, humanity's chief xenolinguistics expert. She had been trying to establish contact for weeks, using every known communication protocol in the galactic database. Whatever they are, they're either not interested in talking, or they don't recognize our signals as attempts at communication. Marcus nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the approaching fleet's formation. 47 separate entities, each the size of a small moon, moving in perfect coordination. Their technology was so advanced that human sensors could barely detect their energy signatures. Any word from the Galactic Security Council? He asked. Dr. Kim's expression soured. They're still debating whether to classify this as a diplomatic contact situation or a potential military threat. Admiral Korvash wants to send a formal greeting committee. Half the council thinks we should prepare defensive positions. The other half thinks we should run away. And what does Earth think we should do? What we always do. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. The monitoring station's main communication array activated, bringing Admiral Korvash's image onto the central screen. The hegemony leader looked older than he had during the Shadow Maw briefings, the stress of managing galactic security during unprecedented times showing in his crystalline features. Hunter Chen, the Admiral began. The Security Council has reached a decision regarding the approaching entities. Let me guess, Marcus said. Half want to fight, half want to hide, and nobody wants to make the hard choices. Actually, they want to put you in charge. Marcus blinked, certain he had misheard. I'm sorry, what? The Council has voted to place you in command of the first contact and defense coordination efforts. Effective immediately, you have operational authority over all galactic military and diplomatic resources assigned to this situation. Dr. Kim nearly dropped her datapad. They're putting a human in charge of galactic defense? They're putting Marcus Chen in charge. Admiral Corvash corrected. The being who identified and eliminated the Shadowmaw threat before it could destroy us all. The Council has concluded that humanity's approach to crisis management is exactly what this situation requires. Marcus stared at the Admiral's image, processing the implications. You realize that if you give me operational authority, I'm going to use it. I won't ask permission for every tactical decision or submit my strategies for committee review. That's exactly what the Council is counting on. They've seen what happens when humanity is given a problem to solve. They want that capability applied to this situation. Even if they don't like the solutions? Admiral Corvash was quiet for a moment. Especially if they don't like the solutions. The approaching entities represent a potential extinction event for our entire galaxy. The Council would rather survive under human leadership than face extinction under their own. After the Admiral signed off, Marcus stood in the observation deck's silence, watching the approaching fleet through the station's enhanced viewers. Dr. Kim busied herself with communication arrays, but he could feel her watching him. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked finally. "I'm thinking about something my grandfather told me when I was young," Marcus replied. "He used to hunt deer in the forests back on Earth, using nothing but a bow and arrow. Old-fashioned, primitive methods that most people considered obsolete. What did he tell you?" "He said the secret to successful hunting wasn't being stronger or faster than your prey. It was understanding your prey better than it understood you. And the key to understanding wasn't watching what they did when they felt safe, it was watching what they did when they felt threatened." Dr. Kim followed his gaze to the approaching fleet. "You think they feel threatened? I think they're preparing for war. Look at their formation, their approach vector, their coordination. This isn't a diplomatic mission or an exploration fleet. This is an invasion force." Marcus activated the station's strategic planning interface and began overlaying tactical data on the approaching entities. Their formation was